Welcome. I am Stephen Collins. I'm the CEO of Matter. We launched 6 years ago, and we've worked with more than 500 companies that range from very early stage to growth stage startups, and we have a suite of services to help them grow. We have a curriculum with more than 100 classes in it, focused on what a healthcare entrepreneur needs to know in order to build a compelling business. We have 5 different mentoring programs that surround entrepreneurs with people who can help them grow. Most importantly among those, PointB, where we take a venture and surround them with a team of advisors who help them advance from point E to point B over 6 months of coaching and guidance. For the last 7 years, we've worked with the Canadian Consulate to execute a special version of PointB every year, where we take companies from Canada and help them advance their solutions and enter the US market. This year, we are delighted to work with this collection of companies. Each of them has fantastic technologies that can help patients and providers here in the US. And at this meeting, we'll hear from each of the teams about what they're building, where they are on their journey, and what they need over the next 6 months in order to help them succeed. I want to thank the Canadian Consulate, especially Julien Rosan and Mali Banuelos, as well as Laura Dalby, who we've worked with to develop this program for this year. So now I'd like to introduce Steve Gould, who will be the MC of today's program. Steve is most importantly a Matter board member and has been a Matter board member since our inception. In addition to that, he's an entrepreneur in residence at the University of Chicago. He is and has been an incredible mentor for countless healthcare and life sciences startup companies. In a prior life, he was the chief of surgery at Michael Reese Hospital, and he led, and took public Northfield Labs, which was a biotech company developing an artificial blood product. Steve has worked very closely with the Consulate on this program, and I will turn it over to him.
Thanks, Steve, and welcome everybody to this program. Steve said this is the 7th program. Matter will be officially 6 years old next week, and the first C2MP program was the official kickoff of Matter in terms of a formal program. So we are delighted. I think we're inexorably bound forever. I want to give a little history, as Steve said. So what we're calling PointB today is the 2nd iteration, version 2 of a mentoring program that began in 2010 called Chicago Innovation Mentors. The C2MP program began, as I said, when we moved SIM into Matter and sort of aligned back in 2015. I want to acknowledge some of the team members, as Steve did. I don't know if Chantal Glass is joining us today. She retired from the Consulate. She and I were the ones that sort of set this up. It was her idea. She learned about the SIM program at a meeting. Next in line was a colleague, Alexei Roy, who spent a few years at the Consulate here and has moved on. I hope he's on the call. The team today that I want to acknowledge, Laura Dalby, Julian Rosan, and Mali Banuelos. They've spent enormous amounts of time with the companies, with Sam and myself over the last month or so getting prepped for today. We've got 4 terrific companies. I know you're all gonna really enjoy them. I will introduce Wayne Robson in a moment, but I want to give one point of history. I do this every year. So the very first year, what you're missing out on virtually today is the very lavish spread that the Consulate kindly sponsors every year. So it's delicious food. We have a full bar with a bar server. And imagine this, a large group of 100 people, large Canadian presence. And during the reception, we ran out of beer. I tell this every year. The Consulate General at the time was Roy Norton, who was terribly embarrassed and assured me that never again would we run out of beer. So that was year 1. The next 5 years, we didn't. And this year, we can't even offer you beer. So I hope that 2022 will be back in real time and you can all participate in that. My other comment is that the Q&A will be a bit different today. I'll go through how we'll work that. I hope we'll be able to retain the intimacy that we have when we do this in person. So before we proceed with the programs, let me now introduce a gentleman who's become a good friend, Wayne Robson. Wayne's been part of the Consulate General program and working for Canada for many years. He is the present acting Consul General, a good friend of Matter, a good friend of PointB. Wayne, thanks for joining us, and please give us a welcome.
Thanks very much, Steve, and thank you to both Stephen Gould and Stephen Collins for the introductions that were there. You saved me some time by telling everybody about the great work of my team already that are working on this. Currently, that's Julianne Rosen and Molly Banuelos, as you mentioned, with Laura Dalby assisting them, as well as Chantal Glass, who I do know is online today, and Alexis Roy, who I'm not sure whether he's online from Ottawa as well. But thank you very much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to join you all today to welcome the 4 Canadian companies selected to participate in the 7th annual edition of the Canada-Chicago Mentoring Program, C2MP as we call it, in partnership with PointB at Matter. I'd like to offer my congratulations to Able Innovations, KA Imaging, Luxonics, and Acoustics, who were selected from a pool of almost 30 Canadian applications by PointB's vetting committee. We're building on great momentum from the last 6 years running this program, and we're grateful to the mentors who dedicated their time to review the applications and for being with us here today virtually and for embarking on this 6-month journey of strategic mentorship that's going to be happening ahead. With Canada's emphasis on progressive and inclusive trade, supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as those led by women and minorities, we're very pleased that we have a representative group today as well in this program from across Canada. So I can't think of a more important goal than improving patients' lives across the healthcare spectrum. I also cannot think of a more challenging year for life science and the healthcare industry than what we've experienced here in 2020 and then into 2021 this year. Your work is meaningful. Your work is challenging. And the world has its eyes on the trajectory of healthcare solutions now more than ever before and has a better understanding of how difficult it is to bring products and solutions to market and have them available for patients. We understand how difficult the past year has been, from the sacrifices made in the healthcare industry, the challenges of pivoting to remote work and responding collectively to the pandemic while navigating a new virtual world. And we recognize the work that Canadian companies and important partners in Chicago, like Matter, are undertaking to advance the industry at this moment with those difficulties in place. The Government of Canada will continue to work collaboratively with partners in Canada and abroad to advance our key priorities. And those are getting the pandemic under control, focusing on our crucial value chains and supply chains between Canada and the United States, and on the economic front, building back better while prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Pursuing those global relationships and creating strategic alliances are essential to that growth. And we're committed to supporting the Canadian firms in the development of commercialization of their technologies. At the Consulate General, we're extremely proud that our program with PointB at Matter is now recognized across Canada as an effective and very efficient model for providing Canadian life sciences ventures with the opportunity to build a professional network here in Chicago. And frankly, I think their best opportunity to build a professional network. It increases their knowledge of the US regulatory framework and the reimbursement strategies they need to understand here in the US and refine their models to more effectively grow into the US market. C2MP now boasts 25 alumni companies from Canada, and we're proud to say that the linkages that they've established during the mentoring period don't stop at the end of the program. The Consulate General, Matter, and even some of the mentors continue to engage with the companies and the alumni to further their success. So as we welcome the 4 Canadian ventures today for this year's cohort, we encourage you to build on the partnership that the Consulate General has initiated with Matter, leverage the connections that we both have with the local ecosystem, and continue to drive cross-border opportunities across the spectrums of innovation, R&D, and commercial functions. While we'd love to host you here in person in Chicago and test Stephen's promise that we will never run out of beer again at these kinds of events, we can't do that this year, but we're confident that this year's remote format will be as beneficial as in the past, and our team here is certainly available to help. The collaboration will play an even stronger role for both countries as we look forward to building back our resilient economies in the post-pandemic world. We're excited to play a part in it, and I know you are as well. So again, thank you, Steve, for the opportunity to say a few words. And as always, thank you to PointB and Matter for your partnership, which has been great over the past 7 years. With that, let's get right into the pitch presentations from our 4 Canadian ventures and the main event that we're actually all here for. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Wayne. We're going to hold you to that. That means everybody next year gets 2 beers for every normal beer they drink. Great. So at this point, we're going to go into the presentations. I see we have a total of 68 participants. I've scrolled through a lot of names I recognize. It looks like there are a lot of new names who may not have attended this before. So I'm going to review the way this works. As I mentioned, the companies and the entrepreneurs have worked very hard to fit into the framework that we found is effective for this sort of program. Each company will present 5 slides in a 5-minute period. That's 5 content slides. The format is slide 1 says what problem they're solving. Number 2 is what solution they have developed. Number 3 is essentially what are the unique features of their solution. Number 4 is sort of a current status of their overview where they are. And then number 5 is really the next steps over the 6-month period and what they're looking for from Matter. They've worked hard to do that. It's very hard to accomplish all of that because these are all fabulous, amazing stories. The reason we do that is to lead next to the 10-minute question and answer session, which is really what I think is the most important part of the program. So if they do their presentations well, and I assure you they all have, it will tee up a bunch of questions. And I've told the entrepreneurs that's where they get to expand in more detail. The entrepreneurs were told keep their answers short. The idea is to get 8 to 10 questions rather than one long lecture. I've told the mentors in the past, I'll tell you again, keep your questions short and focused so we can do that. There's a bit of a change today. We're doing this in webinar fashion. So when you want to ask a question, Sam will go over this later, you're gonna post your question to Q&A, I'm gonna read it. So it may not be quite as intimate. The first couple questions, we'll work this out, but I'm sure that we'll all work together to make this a meaningful and stimulating experience. So with that, let me introduce our first company, it's Electronic Technology. Arjun Puri will be presenting. Arjun?
Once again, thanks very much for that great introduction, Steve. Hi, everyone. My name is Arjun Puri. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer of Luxonic Technologies. And I'm just going to start sharing my screen with you so that you can see my slide deck here. Hoping that everyone can see that now. So yeah, hi, everyone. Thanks for being here with me today. My name is Arjun Puri. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Luxonic Technologies. The company's mission is to enable improved global access to medical service delivery, education, and training with immersive technologies like augmented, virtual, and mixed reality. My background is that I've got more than 10 years on my belt in health information technology assessment, product development, and new technology adoption. I've worked with multiple health systems in Canada, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. And today, I'll be telling you about the company's first product, Sievert, a virtual medical imaging reading room. But before I get to that, let me tell you a little bit about the problem that we face with medical imaging today. Medical imaging is the foundation to providing robust medical care, both for disease diagnosis and for treatment. And to enable global access to radiology services, we need low-cost, sustainable, and scalable infrastructure. And some of those pieces of the puzzle are starting to come together. Modalities like the Butterfly portable ultrasound system and portable x-rays are becoming more portable and low cost. Medical imaging storage is now scalable with the cloud, and the internet can connect radiology supply to demand. Teleradiology companies are now able to provide relief for peak demand with offshore reading at low cost. But there's one critical part of the radiology workflow that has prevented deployment at a global scale. And that critical component is the medical imaging reading room. And it's the last missing piece of that puzzle. Take a look at the background of this slide. This medical imaging reading room is cluttered and it's fragmented. So I present to you Sievert. Sievert is a comprehensive virtual reading room. And you can see it on the background of the slide here. Compared to a traditional medical imaging reading room, which is used by radiologists and other specialists who provide critical diagnostic and routine care, it consists of the physical real estate of the room, the equipment like multiple large monitors, peripherals, and software. The reality is that it's very immobile, extremely poorly integrated, and most importantly, very expensive. Together with all these components, these setups can cost over $30,000 and contains dozens of specialized components that are all fixed in one place. It's not mobile and it's definitely not scalable. On the contrary, Sievert only costs approximately 20% of a traditional reading room renovation. It's scalable, it's integrated, and it's modular, and most of all, it's portable. You can take it anywhere with you. It also comes along with built-in teleradiology and collaboration tools. So with Sievert, you can take your medical imaging reading room with you anywhere. It replaces the entire reading room with a VR headset and a laptop. Now, for the first time, Sievert will allow medical imaging services to scale globally. But I'm sure you want to know what makes Sievert different from all those other medical imaging rooms. And that is our relentless focus on medical imaging workflows. We've designed Sievert to replicate existing tools and workflows for an easy transition and change management period for end users. We're not just building cool tools, we're building tools for operational deployment. We integrate across the entire clinical information system ecosystem with PACS, with radiology information systems, and this is a hard problem to solve even outside of VR. Next, Sievert is very modular. It's a medical imaging platform that enables capabilities, including study interpretation, but also one-on-one or group collaboration in a virtual room and medical teaching. Over time, we're going to expand on the platform features with additional modules to enable new capabilities. I like to say that Sievert will be the hub for medical imaging workflows. And best of all, like I mentioned before, it's portable and low cost. All you need is a laptop and a VR headset, and it costs less than 1/4 of the traditional setup while being more portable, more immersive, and distraction-free. Take a quick look at the images onto the right of the screen here, comparing the traditional cluttered reading room to Sievert. When you put on the headset, you get this integrated, distraction-free, and most importantly, infinitely configurable setup by study type without ever needing to purchase or replace monitors or computer towers. So let me tell you a little bit more about Luxonic. First, the product. Sievert has launched in Canada and USA alongside our first release module, the medical education module. We're releasing our collaboration module tomorrow. Sievert is now being piloted at innovative health institutions like Cleveland Clinic, Mass General Hospital, and Hamilton Health Sciences Centre in Canada. These pilots are generating evidence regarding usability, diagnostic quality, and VR-enabled medical imaging. It's also being integrated tightly at Puriform Radiology clinics in Calgary, Alberta, who are going to be our first paying customers. We've submitted our diagnostic module to Health Canada for approval through their COVID-19 intermortar accelerator process. And we've also filed a provisional patent for the entire Sievert ecosystem. Our venture is bootstrapped along with non-dilutive funding from various government and innovation grants. We're amid raising a bridge round to accelerate our growth and scale and marketing efforts, most importantly. We'd like to convert those pilots to customers, and I've listed some statistics about our serviceable markets and total attainable markets here. I want to talk a little bit about next steps and what we're hoping to get some help from the Matter Network on now. So for us, we're looking to expand into new geographies and look at new key customers. So business development and understanding the go-to-market strategies for the South are extremely important. We also need to get regulatory approval and work a little bit on our QMS system to be more ISO compliant and go through the FDA 510K filing process. And finally, we also want to establish some key strategic collaborations and partnerships for our turnkey offering. Sievert is the hub for medical imaging. We don't necessarily want to recreate the RIS and PAC systems, but we want to make it more accessible for emerging markets by offering a turnkey solution to drop a portable medical imaging clinic anywhere in the world. We'd love to work with Matter mentors to identify and engage strategic partners and make this a reality. Thank you very much for your time. Happy to take any questions that you might have for me now.
Great. Thanks, Arjun. So for the mentors, thanks. We just got question number 1. As I said, we're going to feel our way maybe for the first few minutes here. Please, while you're doing, we're going to ask you to multitask, and get your questions in. We'll get the hang of it. The first question is from David Stump. What is the feedback from users about the image resolution? My experience with radiologists was their desire for very high resolution. Arjun, for your information, David is a neurologist, was a former chair of the Department of Neurology at Northwestern, so it's a very educated question.
Yeah, excellent question, David. Thanks for submitting that. So we've tested Sievert with over 200 radiologists to date, and for everything except mammography, the resolution in the VR headsets is there. Our headset partners' specifications for the panels themselves exceed or meet the ACR recommendations on things like luminance, ambient lighting, and pixel pitch as well. We're doing additional clinical evidence generation studies to validate these beyond anecdotal evidence, but that's the feedback that we've received so far.
Great, thanks. The next question is from Zoe Kwan, another longtime accomplished mentor. What are the current requirements on VR from FDA? Also, what bandwidth requirements and limitations giving it resolution is an issue?
Yeah, excellent question, Zoe. So currently the FDA doesn't have a set strategy for regulating mixed reality technologies for medical uses. In March of 2020, there was a session held at the FDA in Maryland, which I attended, where there was a workshop to identify how to regulate these technologies. Our request of the FDA is to separate the software from the hardware, because what we're creating is a virtual software solution. So requirements from the FDA, we believe that we'll be going through the 510(k) submission process based on predicate devices, because there have been other devices, particularly in AR technologies, that have had similar solutions. But what they've done is they've ported a desktop application just to be viewed on AR goggles. What we've created here is a ground up solution meant for very efficient workflows in radiology.
So let me chime in here. So I have a lot of FDA experience, not with devices, but therapeutics. And FDA's primary concern is always safety. So going the predicate route means you're going to compare to something that's out there. You know, we can talk about what your label is going to be. The question that I think they would ask is, how do I know that using this technology may not result, how do I know that will not result in inaccurate diagnosis that results in misdiagnosis or overdiagnosis and harm to patients? That is the concern of the FDA. How do you think about that?
Yeah, great question, Steve. So ultimately, both Health Canada and FDA are trying to de-risk the public from potential risks that this device could bring. We are producing data of safety and clinical efficacy in our pilots right now. And as part of the Health Canada approval process, we're actually having independent radiologists review the system and benchmark it compared to existing systems, comparing things like measurements of pathology, identification of region of interests. We intend to offer a comparative review process here that will help alleviate some of those concerns and minimize the risks to the patient and the system here.
So you'll have a population for which there are readings and interpretations from the current approach versus your approach. Okay, great, thanks. So there's a question from Kathy about the legal aspects of getting this approved. I think we've covered that. Tom Brya has the following question. Any benefits other than low cost?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that's a great question. So as I mentioned, Sievert is a medical imaging platform or a hub. During COVID, one of the things that we've had our institutional partners tell us is that there are major disruptions to resident teaching, as well as interprofessional collaboration. So the other benefits that Sievert as a platform brings is the modularity. It's able to offer real-time interprofessional collaboration over medical cases where someone can take a VR headset, put it on their head, and be in someone else's medical imaging reading room alongside with them. So the opportunity for intimate real-time collaboration with medical imaging workflows at your disposal is a massive benefit. Beyond that, like I mentioned, resident education is completely disrupted right now. Traditionally, resident education would take place, or undergraduate education would take place, where you've got a student hovering behind the staff radiologist, looking over their shoulder, watching their medical imaging workflows. You can't really do that anymore because of COVID in a physically distanced manner. So the benefits of being able to provide a portable workstation, something as small as a VR headset, makes it more accessible for the student and a lot more efficient for the institution that is doing the teaching as well.
Thanks. All right, the next question, Arjun, we talked about in prep. I told you you'd get asked about this, and here's the opportunity to address it. So this is from Christine Rohan. What is the market potential for this solution? How are you thinking about pricing and your total addressable market per radiologist, per facility? So here's your chance to expand on some of the stuff we've talked about.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Christine, for submitting that question. So the market potential here is actually quite large. I'll talk about North America first. There are 30,000 imaging centers and approximately 54,000 radiologists in North America. So our total addressable market is on a worldwide scale, but our serviceable obtainable market or addressable market right now is 7.5 billion. Now, this is based on a statistic that there are 3.6 billion medical imaging studies interpreted annually, and North America statistic has been used to calculate our obtainable and addressable markets here. With respect to your question about pricing strategy, we've seen that health institutions and systems are moving towards a value-based healthcare model and a pay-for-performance model. So it is very common in teleradiology today. So our compensation model for our diagnostic module will be based on the number of studies interpreted and the various different components of the CVERT ecosystem that you would use. So for example, if you were to read an X-ray and the government reimburses at a rate of, let's say, $60 per X-ray, we would take $1.75 to $2 for the interpretation of that image. In addition to that, I mentioned that CVERT is a hub and a platform. So our value-added modules, like our medical education module or our collaboration module, follow a software as a service subscription fee on a monthly or annual basis, ranging in price from anywhere between 10 to 40 bucks a module.
Okay. And again, as we discussed, a lot of your forward thinking is regarding value-based care. We're really not there yet in this country. How do you think about starting to enter here, which I know is one of the things you want to get from the mentors?
Yeah, great point there, Steve. So, I think we understand that Canada is a single payer system, and the domain and the landscape in the States is quite different from that regard. There are a lot of innovative institutions looking to work with you on a variety of different innovation projects that help really advance the agenda. So for institutions that are looking to work with us on an enterprise basis, we're absolutely happy to discuss a volume license for them and figure out what works from them based on their workflows and their reimbursement strategies. So right now, Steve, I think you and I discussed a cost for an implementation project, depending on the tightness of the integration of the product that they would like at their institution, how many different clinical information systems you'd like integration across. So there would be an implementation project. And what we really offer, Steve, is the conversion from capital expenditure over to operational expenditure, and the ability for those institutions to not have to take on technology debt and maintenance that is going to be end of life a couple of years later. Instead, we want to offer them a managed service that offers benefits of integrated routine workflows.
Okay. You talked about the 3.6 billion studies. I'm not sure today you've talked about how many reading rooms there are. How do you think about that? So if you go to Northwestern University, Chicago, big places, how many reading rooms do they have, and what's the impact for what you're doing compared to what is present?
Yeah, excellent question. So I think I brought up the statistic earlier of 30,000 imaging centers approximately in North America. Each one of those imaging centers ranges from private practices, small and large in size, as well as hospitals. Hospital reading rooms can consist of multiple workstations, anywhere between 5 to 20, depending on the size of the institution. And institutions can even have more than one reading room, depending on their size as well. So yeah, I'd say that based on that statistic, it would be at least a 4 to 10-fold increase. So I'd say somewhere between and I'd be offering you some guesstimates here, but based on reasonable assumptions, 100,000 reading room setups themselves, with workstations ranging from anywhere between 4 to 10.
Okay, great. Thanks, Arjun. Thanks to the mentors. That's the end of our 10-minute Q&A. So we've got through one. I hope everybody's getting the feel of this. I'm getting used to looking at the questions and trying to translate those for you.
Thanks very much, Steve.
Okay, thanks everyone. So now let's move on to the second venture. It's on acoustics. Presenter is going to be Beth Rogozinski. I think you'll enjoy this. You're going to hear about ultrasound, but sort of a novel story. So pay attention and get your questions ready.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Steve.
Okay, Beth.
I really appreciate being here. So Sam and everybody at Matter, let me just share my screen. Oh, 1 second. Okay. Can everybody see that now? I'm assuming that you can. So thanks very much. Okay, great. Well, structural liver disease is what I'm here to talk to you about today. Structural liver disease, such as liver fat and fibrosis, are expected to drive most liver-related cancers, mortalities, and/or transplants in the next decade. Over 2 billion people globally are living with or are at risk of liver disease. And as this disease is often asymptomatic until it reaches very advanced stages, most of them don't even know it. Current preventative approaches to catch and diagnose liver disease early are complex and time-consuming, with several appointments and specialists involved. They're expensive and minimally available and involve high-end imaging such as MRI, or they involve highly invasive biopsies. Overall, the total liver diagnostics market is worth over $30 billion and expected to grow significantly as a suite of new liver drugs due to clear the FDA will require confirmed diagnosis and ongoing patient surveillance. As Steve mentioned, my name is Beth Rogozinski, and I'm here to introduce you to acoustics and to present to you our first product, the Onyx Liver Fibrosis Categorization Solution. The Onyx is a complete liver surveillance and diagnostic solution for point-of-care liver evaluation. Our solution, now tested on over 4,000 patients, offers a unique, inexpensive approach to quickly examine a patient's liver. Within minutes, any clinician or care team member can perform the exam and receive information on the state of a patient's liver. No training required, and the quantified results can be read by any MD and provide actionable insights into your patient's liver health. Acoustics makes the complex, expensive, and invasive process of diagnosing liver fibrosis seamless, painless, and done in 5 minutes. We are a hardware-agnostic, software-only solution, but we leverage the new RISE and low-cost ultrasound systems that cost under $4,000. As a matter of fact, our enhanced value comes via these low-end and inexpensive ultrasound systems that are now coming onto the market. These systems are exciting, but are limited due to poor image quality. But our approach doesn't require images. Unlike other players in this space, we're not doing image recognition. Instead, we apply AI and machine learning to raw ultrasound signals from these readily available handheld ultrasound devices to rapidly differentiate healthy versus diseased tissues. There's a wealth of information in these raw signals that can be aligned with existing standards and categorization systems. And via our approach, we remove the variability of both ultrasound acquisition as well as its interpretation. Our approach is protected by a growing patent portfolio and our custom collected data set of now over 2 million pieces of data. This represents the single largest RF signal data set in the world. Our regulatory submissions for this first product, the Onyx Liver Fibrosis Categorization Solution, are underway. We've achieved over 90% accuracy for this initial offering compared to the FibroScan and have begun our breakthrough devices designation request and our 510(k) pre-sub. We're aiming for full clearance for this initial product by the end of 2021. We have systems deployed in 6 clinics and 4,000 patients imaged. We have partnerships in place with multiple OEMs and are initiating pharma relationships as well. We have over 20 MDs involved in our projects and programs and have MDs who have invested in our seed round. We provide a clear value proposition to patients, MDs, clinics, and payers. We're currently out raising a $15 million A round, and with this, we'll launch our first products, start generating revenues, and expand our pipeline to tackle the $30 billion liver diagnostics market and build a $1 billion business. Beyond closing our A round, which we hope to do in the next 3 months, our focus is on our go-to-market strategy and execution, and includes pursuing additional biopharma and med device partner relationships, developing provider and payer relationships, and continuing the development of our value proposition and our health economic outcomes research, commercialization and pricing for various clinical end users, and continuing the development of our regulatory strategy and submissions. If you'd like to join us in our quest to revolutionize diagnostics, feel free to reach out. I'm Beth Rogozinski, CEO of Oncoustics, and I thank you for your time and look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Beth. Nice job. You set up with some of your comments. The first question from Zoe Kwan. The use of AI has been hotly debated in diagnosis. What is your approach to gain approval? I'll let you answer that, and I'm going to have a follow-on based on your comment about breakthrough. But why don't you start answering Zoe's question?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're taking a really very agile approach to the US FDA, and the FDA has actually just recently come out with new standards for AI, requiring us to both validate and truth against an existing system as well as lock the algorithms down. So we're actually in early discussions with them about how we might be able to expand the algorithm and then improve over time. But our initial plan is that we'll submit this first Onyx product to be a screening device truthed against the FibroScan. So 100% of our patients have actually had a FibroScan as a validation system by which we're truthing. And so this approach is one that's actually been approved by the FDA with a number of devices. So we're working with a regulatory consultant on this, and we've got a number of predicates and precedents that we'll be putting in place in front of the FDA.
Thanks. Let me ask a question here, because when we had our prep sessions, either you didn't say or I didn't pick up that you were thinking about breakthrough status. So I'm not sure I understand that, because breakthrough means you're addressing some unmet medical need. So what is the unmet medical need here, and how are you going to demonstrate that you're substantially better?
Yeah, thanks for that great question, Steve. So I think that that's actually even a key component of what we're doing, especially in the liver. The unmet medical need is liver disease goes undiagnosed until it's often too late for patients, right? A lot of times, the first sign of a NASH or NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease presentation, is the patient actually has advanced jaundice or other signs of liver failure, right? And so with our device, we can actually take high-risk patients that are presenting with obesity, metabolic disorder, type 2 diabetes, and give them a liver screen so that they may be able to actually stop the progression of this disease before it gets too far. So the suite of new drugs that I was mentioning, there's been billions of dollars poured into NASH and NAFLD drugs by the biopharma industry. When we're tracking over 80 that are currently in human trials and development, over 100 clinical trials ongoing now. So there's this rash of new drugs that are coming on to address this need. But there's no good way to diagnose these patients yet, and there's no good way at point of care. So via our system, any point of care clinician that sees high-risk patients would be able to offer some insight into a patient's liver.
Okay, I got 2 really good questions coming up. Let me follow on that one. Doug Wilkerson asked, has the savings to payers been clearly defined with early detection? So you're making the case you can pick it up earlier, and Doug's asking, so what, right?
Yeah. So the savings have been clearly demonstrated that early detection actually helps. Now, our personal HEOR of how we compare to other devices that are out there, that's one of the things that we're working on right now, right? Because we're a much less expensive system than any of the other modalities that are out there. And as you can imagine, if there's a huge cost savings when a patient is undergoing a biopsy, which is a $10,000 exam, or an MRI, which is in the tens of thousands, or can be in the thousands at least, they're significant. So at its advanced stages, and NASH in 2019 actually overtook all other forms of liver disease as the leading cause of requiring patients to have a liver transplant, right? And as you can imagine, liver transplants are hugely expensive. So there's been a number of, public health documents that show that early diagnosis actually, can save significant amounts of money. But to our particular device, we're starting those trials in HEOR now.
Okay, so a follow-up to that from Matthew Sakamoto. Where in the diagnosis timeline does OncX pick up NASH or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as compared to liver enzymes like AST or ALT?
Yeah, excellent question. We get asked this a lot because the ALT over AST ratio is a really common and very easy to measure metric of liver health. Unfortunately, it actually only, that blood level actually only, and liver enzyme level only shifts when the patient is at very advanced stages. One hepatologist that we've been working with and talking to told us that over 60% of her cirrhosis patients actually have normal blood enzyme levels, right? So what we're really looking to do is to get much further down the pipeline and intervene, and with this first product to detect liver fibrosis. So from a hepatology perspective, and we've got products in our pipeline for NASH and NAFLD, as well as cancer diagnosis and cancer detection. But with fibrosis, it's the single most important prognostic indicator of which patient is going to advance to disastrous levels of this disease. So even with this, we're looking to be much earlier than an advance in ALT over AST.
So here, this is the first moment where I really missed the live interaction, because at this point, if Matthew were here, I'm speaking for Matthew, he'd be standing, he'd be looking in the eye. So Beth, you're telling me that the fibrosis, the structural changes precede the biochemical changes. That's your answer.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
There you go, Matthew. All right. David Stump asked a question. Let's go back to the technical aspects. Can you explain a little more about the report that is generated?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually generate a quantitative assessment of a patient's liver that's based on a normative set of all of the livers that are in our database, right? And so this is part of our secret sauce with the AI and the ML approach. So our system looks at tissue characteristics, micro tissue characteristics, and then compares it across the normative set. And so our clinicians that we're currently working with, what they're mostly interested in is the patient's liver healthy? Is it fibrotic? Is it cirrhotic? So we give them some actionable insights on what they need to do next for their patients, right? If this is an endocrinologist looking at this and the patient is coming up with a cirrhotic liver, then the clear path is to recommend that patient go and speak to a hepatologist and get further studies. So beyond that quantitative, we can offer, and we do offer, an additional report that shows the images to the clinician if they're interested in seeing them. But most of our clinicians have told us that they just want really those actionable insights.
Okay. Here's a question that I was waiting for, because I hadn't seen much yet about economics. Let me read the question. So this is from David Stump again, but it's taking where I want to go. Payers will be concerned about increased testing while your cost is lower. I want you to go into cost more. You said the cost of the device is low. You might end up costing more by increasing the volume. How are you thinking about the economics of this in terms of where the payment would be, what the charges would be, and David's question about another low price test that we do so many more of them we're adding to the system?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an excellent question, and and this actually goes back to even the earlier question around the health economics of this, right? Early detection, at the end of the day, costs less, right? Because the liver is an organ like the skin that can actually regenerate itself and heal itself. And even prior to these new drugs coming onto market, there are interventions that work for these patients, but they don't know that they have a disease yet, right? And so, I think that there's huge value for the payers in actually intervening early prior to, the need for a patient to have even small numbers of patients to have liver transplants. So I think that that's number one. Number two is, the CPT codes that we're looking to connect to already exist for the FibroScan. This reimburses about 100, it varies state to state, but $100 to $140 for clinical reimbursement. Certain blood tests like the ELF for liver disease cost over $500, $600 to actually even get those blood tests. So this is and because this is point of care and can be at any point of care office, the patient doesn't actually need to be referred on to a specialist. So there's savings there. I mean, there's really kind of savings across the board to have this brought downstream.
Okay, let me ask, we got time for one more question from Mary Beth Arzak, again, as a follow-up to that. Would this technology then be widely administered for all people, regardless of symptoms? But what I interpret that question, are you saying this is part of an annual physical?
There are hepatologists that work with us that think it should be, right? UCLA Health suggests that up to 34% of the US population is at risk of NAFLD. And if this were any other disease and we weren't testing for it, it would just be staggering. But what we're suggesting and what we've actually are looking to roll out with is that patients that are presenting at high risk of these structural liver diseases should be screened on a regular basis, right? And so that includes not only patients that have actually had an exposure to a viral hepatitis like chronic Hep B or Hep C, but also these patients that are presenting at high risk of NAFLD and NASH, right? And so that includes the metabolic disorder, obesity, type 2 diabetes, et cetera.
Great. All right. Thanks, Beth. Thanks, mentors. I think we're getting the hang of it. I feel like I'm getting the hang of it. I hope this is working for the mentors. We're ready for our next presentation. Next, we're going to go to KA Imaging, Amol Karnik, since he has to leave a bit early. So, Amol?
Great, thanks. Well, thank you everyone for your time. I appreciate. KA Imaging has created what we call color X-ray, and it's fundamentally based on a technology that exists called dual energy, but we've improved it to allow for better diagnostics, better imaging, and therefore better patient outcomes.
Amol, I want to interrupt one moment. I want to tell you and Jay, who only thought, when possible, use your pointer on the screen.
Okay.
Some of the last two didn't, and it'll be helpful if you're able to do that. Thank you.
Absolutely. So if we need it, I'll have it ready. Fantastic. So X-ray, as everyone knows, is one of the oldest medical imaging modalities. It's been around 120 years. It's fantastic for bones, but it's not very good at soft tissue differentiation. Essentially, X-ray is inadequate for understanding what you're looking at. So they did create something called dual energy X-ray. And the reason is, when you look at an image such as this standard chest X-ray, can you understand what this little dot is? Is this bone? Is it calcified? Is it a nodule? You can't really distinguish that. So dual energy came around to try and understand what this could be. And dual energy itself has been around 20, 30 years. It's actually clinically proven. We've got 200 publications on dual energy already. You know, it's faster reading. Actually, you can actually read these X-ray images faster with dual energy. It's more cost effective than CT and a significantly lower dose than CT. The problem is, and one of the reasons you may have not heard about dual energy to date, is it requires 2 radiation exposures. These 2 radiation exposures are separated in time, and that time difference, even though it's a half second, is long enough that it creates what we call a motion artifact. Think about it. You as a person can actually hold your breath, but you can't stop your heart now. We all like our hearts beating, but that beating heart actually creates what we call this motion artifact. As you can see on the image to the right, You got these squiggly lines, and those squiggly lines could be misinterpreted as nodules, sometimes gives you false positives and requires retakes and more radiation. You can't do what we call the side view, lateral view. It does require a full fixed room, and it is relatively much more expensive than standard X-ray. So what we did is we created an X-ray detector that does all the energy separation in the detector itself. And rather than 2 energies, we can actually separate 3 energies. So one of the reasons we say color X-ray at times, like your eye can see 3 colors and create this amazing color world, we've created an X-ray detector that has 3 different energy bins and does the fundamentals of dual energy as well. So with 1 radiation exposure, we get all this extra information. So now there's no motion artifact. We've made this in what we call an ISO cassette size. And that means it's universally compatible with every X-ray system in the world. We can change the X-ray detector and make it dual energy, but we've also made it portable with Wi-Fi and battery, so it can go to the bedside. Think about the ICUs, the emergency rooms, the ward. We can use that anywhere. But because we've also made this in a standard X-ray detector, we don't change the current workflow. They just replace their detector with our detector. We do have our Health Canada and US FDA 510K clearance. We had that received that last year. Just to give you an example of what dual energy does, if you look at the images on the right, this is your standard X-ray. This is with limiting the bones. So dual energy allows you to eliminate the bones, look at the soft tissue, or conversely, look at the bone image. Great example is here is this is a little nodule in here that's very difficult to see in the regular image, very easy to see in the bone image. And by seeing that, you can actually tell this is a calcified nodule, not cancerous, whereas the cancer is here, pneumonia on the right-hand side, and much easier to read and also faster to read because you get to see what you need to see, not what you have to see. So just from a commercialization point of view, where we are, we've created our first color X-rays back in 2017. We initiated a lung cancer trial comparing to CT back in 2018. We've got about 24 patients with great correlation to CT. And we could actually see diseases that were hidden by the bones in our dual energy that was missed by the X-ray but picked up by the CT as well. We did close $10 million in 2019 from a large contract manufacturer. They're also one of our contract manufacturers as well. We had our first sales in non-destructive testing and a $5 million sales commitment also in the industrial inspection. In 2020, we actually received our 510Ks, our Health Canada, but also started a pneumonia COVID trial where in that first 30 patients, we've been able to see a false positive and a false negative as compared to standard X-ray, which is significant since pneumonia can be a challenge. And of course, COVID is important. We do have 54 global patents, of which 17 are issued in the US alone. Just to give you an overall the market size, if we make an assumption of a sales price of about $100,000, we also do have a hardware as a service model that we're introducing as well. There's about 35,000 in the US, so it's a $3.5 billion market. And if we target initial dual energy systems, there's about 6,000 in the US, so it's about a $600,000 market. Just to give you an idea and an overview of some of the use cases, we see lung cancer, pneumonia, and cardiac disease as opportunities. Lung cancer, because dual energy is already clinically proven. As I mentioned, there's over 200 present publications on dual energy alone that can help see the cancer better. When you see cancers that are hidden by the lung, by the bones, it's much better, obviously, for the patients and earlier diagnosis, and obviously lowering the lawsuits. Pneumonia is actually a big problem. It's a $10 billion problem because it's initially missed in the emergency room because the current X-rays don't have the sensitivity to be able to see pneumonia, whereas our X-ray does. And if we can eliminate and reduce this $10 billion problem and also better patient outcomes, they're not in the hospital for 2 months, so obviously significantly better. And we can actually see calcified coronary arteries, in our images as well. And this is a 1.2 trillion global problem when it comes to cardiac disease. So identifying cardiac disease early is very important. So we've got our FDA clearances. So now what we're trying to focus on is really, sales and marketing. We want to get out there. We want to get our key opinion leaders set up, build our sales and service infrastructure. We want to validate a hardware as a service business model. So COVID has hurt a lot of capital purchases. So looking at this hardware as a service model, but then also make sure we're ready to raise $25 million. We're looking to raise $25 million to focus on this commercialization. So this is, making sure looking for people can help us validate the business models, reviewing our pitches, making sure we're ready for that 25 million as well, but also looking at the sales and marketing infrastructures and the right strategies there as well. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys allowing me to go a little ahead of time too.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amal. So the first question is from Zoe Kwan. So I want to encourage the mentors that have not chimed in yet to don't be bashful. David and Zoe are longtime sim mentors and are in the spirit of asking lots of questions. So I encourage the rest of you. So the first question from Zoe, what training does a clinician need to make best use of your technology?
So to answer that question, radiologists have been trained in dual energy in school, and some of them may have. So any radiologists we've talked to have said, yes, we know dual energy, but some sites don't have it. Other sites that do have it require almost no training. But as you can see from the images here on the right-hand side, it's very easy for these radiologists to understand. For one of our clinical trials, the first one, they didn't have dual energy, and about 10 minutes reviewing these images, he got it and did the reviews for us.
Okay. Tell me a bit more. You said the 510K. So what will be the label? What will be the indication that you will be able?
It's a general radiography with a dual energy option.
Okay. All right. Next question from David Stump, our neurologist, as I said. Can you look at the nervous system without the bones, spine, brain?
We haven't tried to do so yet, so we'd have to see how it may appear more in the soft tissue. This is the chest X-ray. Obviously, we can't see the soft tissue in here because of the spine and the way. We may have to look at different angles to see this better. But it may be difficult to see the nervous system over the soft tissue at times. But we'd love to try it out.
Yeah. One of the things you and I talked about during the prep session was the data. Tell us a little more about sort of the first study and the second study. I know you were limited on time, but tell us about these 24 patients with correlation to CT, and then the later one in 2020 where the comparison was X-ray. Just talk about that. I want the group to hear a little more of what you and I have talked about.
Absolutely. So for the first lung cancer trial, given it was the first trial we did, what we did is we tried to get CT as the gold standard. So these are all known lung cancer patients who are having a CT. So alongside with the CT, we had these patients have one of our X-rays. Now, one of our X-rays actually gives you the standard X-ray alongside the dual energy images, the separated images. So in terms of review, the radiologist reviewed all 24 patients in the standard X-ray first. We then randomized it and asked them to look at the dual energy images, and then compared to CT and in the end. And so there were quite a few patients, including this patient right here, where he actually did miss seeing this nodule in the standard DR, and then said it was so obvious in the bone image right here, just popped out, didn't require a lot of information. Now, he was going pretty quickly, to give him some credit. Maybe he spent a little more time because he's had 24, 25 patients to review that day. He just wanted to try and power through it as well. But so that was one of the opportunities. The other one was there was a lesion right at the top in the apex, and he couldn't see it in the standard X-ray. The dual energy just popped out the lesion right there. So that's what we're saying. And when we compare to the CT notes, it was correlated very well to CT.
Yeah.
For the pneumonia trial, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, for the pneumonia trial, it's being held actually at the Cancer Center, the Princess Margaret Cancer Center, under the University Health Network in Toronto. And in that case studies as well, they're having CTs primarily because they're cancer patients. But these patients, what the review was, okay, here's the standard chest X-ray. Again, we give the standard chest X-ray compared to dual energy. And in the first 35 patients, we now have about 70 patients. The first 35 patients, the radiologist called out and said, okay, this is a pneumonia, reviewed the dual energy, said, no, it's not pneumonia, and confirmed to be not pneumonia. And then the same thing, called a patient, it was normal, turned out to looked at the dual energy images, said there's pneumonia, and turned out to be pneumonia.
Okay, so I want to make sure everyone follows, which it took me a bit of time to make sure I was clear. So CT is the gold standard. If you did a CT on every patient, you'd pick this up. But obviously that's a very expensive procedure, takes longer than chest surgery, everything else. So the concept here is what I'm always trying to demonstrate with the data to date is that their approach is equivalent all to CT as good as, right?
Yeah, what we try and say is we're not, CT is an amazing 3D modality. We're still 2D, but when you take the front view and the side view, we have a much better chance of not missing some of the things that standard X-ray will miss. Are we 100% compliant to CT? Probably not, because of the 3D aspect of it. But we do get significantly better than standard X-ray.
Okay.
And we use it to optimize the use of CT as well. That's probably another way to use it.
Yeah. Okay. An interesting question from Matthew Sakamoto. Is reimbursement different for reading a dual energy versus a regular chest X-ray? And as part of that, it seems like radiologists are trained to read these. I assume he means the dual energy. But what about emergency medicine or internal medicine docs that also often wet review these images prior to official report?
So we are not, dual energy is not separately reimbursed compared to current X-ray. GE launched one of their systems about 20 years ago and never brought in a new code. So there is the possibility of going down towards looking for a new code. We're just going to evaluate that. And that's actually, if there's some mentors who got some AMA experience or CPT experience, it'd be great to speak to them about that as well. The other part of that is, looking at these images, we have, there was a publication actually, addressing your question about other radiologists or other, wet reads in the emergency room, is that they did a study where they showed, a resident standard X-ray and then dual energy X-rays. And the reading capability of the residents actually came up to the radiologists because when they're looking for lines and tubes, here's an example where, as pacemaker, think about a line or tube, much easier to see where it is and ends and clear than in the standard film, in the standard X-ray. So yes, we do see that this will be an opportunity for others outside of radiology to have an easier time to understand and review and diagnose based on the dual energies as opposed to standard X-ray.
Okay, we're near the end, but last question from Doug Wilkerson, excuse me, Doug. Sorry for some ignorance on this, but does this add any extra cost to each X-ray other than the cost for the device if you sell as a service?
No, it doesn't add any additional cost. It's a standard X-ray in that side. It's a digital. Think about your digital camera. When you take a picture, it gets processed and sent to the computers or the laptops and the PAC systems. So there's no additional cost per image or per patient. Right. And we also have, because we offer 6 images, we know AI will significantly improve as well.
Okay. Terrific, great. Thanks, Amal. Glad we could get you in before you had a leave.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys allowing me to go so.
Great. Well, we're ready for the last one. We're right on time. We were supposed to wrap up by 12:30 for the networking. So the 4th presentation today is from Able Innovations, Jay Singh. I want to give Jay a special shout out. We had 4, and then due to some unforeseen circumstances, the original 4th last Friday basically told us they'd be unable to participate. So the folks from the Consulate and Sam went into high gear and identified Jay, who was right at the edge in the selection process. So Jay's done an amazing job of coming up to speed without the multi-week preparation that everyone else did. So this is a really interesting story. I'm delighted it's here. So thank you, Jay. The floor is yours.
Really appreciate that, Steve, and I'll take an extra beer for that when I do come. But thank you so much for all the support over the last 3-4 days. The Matter program, I'm really starting to see the power behind it and how it can benefit us. So hello, everyone. My name is Jay, and I'm the founder and CEO of Able Innovations. And my story began when I was quite young, and I used to volunteer at long-term care facilities where my mom used to work. And while there, I witnessed her perform the back-breaking task of transfers and injure herself. Now, transfer refers to the daily routine task of lifting and moving immobile individuals between surfaces, be it beds, wheelchairs, or stretchers. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the task of lateral supine transfers, which is transferring individuals who are supine between imaging tables, stretchers, beds. You'd be surprised to learn that these transfers take place hundreds of times every single day in a typical healthcare facility, with each transfer requiring between 2 to 8 staff exerting back-breaking effort. Now, this results in a staggeringly high rate of injuries to our frontline staff, but also an immensely high rate of labor utilization. In fact, in a 2017 study, it was found that over $18 billion in costs can be attributed to patient transfer and handling related costs every single year in the United States alone. At Able Innovations, we're solving this by developing the Delta platform. The Delta platform conducts these same labor-intensive transfers in a completely automated, safe manner using our smart technology, which enables a single caregiver to conduct effortless and contactless transfers. Now, this is made possible by means of our compact conveyor belt type technology that can compress the surface one is on, safely roll underneath them without subjecting frail skin to any excessive shear or normal forces, and then they can be shuttled to the side while the bedding is being changed, or they can be shuttled to the next surface or transported and then transferred right off. We've thoroughly studied the competitive landscape, and nothing even comes close to what we're trying to do. Transfer sheets, rollers, lifts represent the status quo. That technology has mainly been the same over the last 5 to 7 decades. They're riddled with issues associated with high labor utilization, injuries, and when you consider the all-in cost of transfers, they're extremely expensive. There's a new class of devices that we're terming electromechanical transfer devices that are highly technical renditions of this technology, are big, bulky, and require technicians to operate. Now, there's significant barriers because they're just not conducive to operating in a kind of fast-paced hospital ward environment. This is where the Delta platform is in a class of its own, really focusing on how individuals interact with the device. We're bringing in state-of-the-art technology that allows our device to make complex decisions. And a nuanced way to explain it is there were MP3 players before the iPod came in. The iPod took over the market and grew the market because it transformed how individuals interacted with that piece of technology. With that in mind, each Delta is highly beneficial for facilities. As now you have fewer individuals engaged in the transfer, there is a path towards labor savings. Further, now that if you look at it in the context of a single clinical ward, we can significantly increase clinical throughput. For example, if you look at imaging, resulting in greater revenue. We will definitely have better patient-related outcomes, as this is a much more dignified manner of moving individuals, and we're also eliminating the direct source of injuries to both patients as well as frontline staff. Further, you no longer need multiple individuals to converge in close quarters in order to conduct a successful transfer, as we offer single caregiver contactless transfers with the Delta. To date, we've established the safety of our technology as a part of a preclinical validation study. The report was published in the IEEE journal last year that showed that our technology exerts 4 times less in terms of peak magnitude, shear, and normal forces on delicate skin when compared to existing methods of transfer. With that in mind, we've developed our full-scale unit, and we're currently productizing that, and we've developed a lot of key IP along the way. Hospitals are lining up to pilot this technology as soon as it's ready. So we have one study that's all set up where they will be publishing the results to be translatable for facilities all across North America, and we're in discussions with 2 more pilot facilities. With that in mind, we will look to commercialize toward the end of this year, and then look to address different modalities, getting into the bed to wheelchair, and really drawing a vision path where we believe our technology can pave the way for individuals to be transferred between beds to wheelchairs at home, transforming how and where they spend their golden years. We've also established a clear value-based pricing model where we're looking at 10x savings for our customers, resulting in over a 5-year return period. So our goals for 2021 are fairly straightforward. We're looking to demonstrate our product market fit with 16 units. On the basis of that, we're looking to raise a $7 million Series A in Q4. We want to register with GPOs. Our ask for you is we're looking for guidance on establishing early sales, a reimbursement strategy, connections to interested investors and VCs, and building a detailed and sustainable strategy. Our lead mentor is Kevin, and we're looking for individuals with experience in the reimbursement, medical device, clinical workflows, and maybe associated potential partners. Most importantly, we're looking for champions who really understand the potential our technology can have and can join us on our journey to to help transform the lives of millions around the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Nice job. I want to point out to the audience, if you didn't recognize the actor in the video, it was Jay, and we should comment on his very high fashion socks you were wearing.
I was hoping nobody would see that.
Yeah. The second comment on a personal note, so I am a surgeon. I think many folks know that. And I was a vascular surgeon, so a lot of elderly, heavy, obese patients. And I did everything I could, I don't mind saying this, to avoid being part of the lift from the operating table to the gurney at the end of the case, because you certainly feel it in your back. So I think this is really interesting. So the first question here is from John. Sorry, I don't know John's last name. How does the device deal with sterilization? Also, regarding durability, did testing encounter jamming or tearing of the transfer belt?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are two very insightful questions. So sterilization is actually one of the key advantages that we're looking to incorporate within the device. Right now, sterilization is you wipe down the surface with different agents, and there can be soiling and various agents. What we're developing right now is, given that our platform is essentially a conveyor belt that moves into a closed enclosure, we are able to subject it to high intensity UV, as well as kind of like a cleaning and scrubbing module. Now, this is being developed separately. We're not including as a part of our pilot release, but this is what we know will be a very big part of our future product and feature release. But as of right now, sterilization is being dealt with what practice with IPAC committees is already, which is clean down the surface after every transfer. But we know we can definitely innovate a lot on that and change that as well. In terms of durability and jamming and tearing, the way the actual mechanics work, they actually do not allow any pinching, jamming. This is a very complex device in a simple iteration. So we have a lot of sensors that are constantly monitoring tension, pressure, because safety is the key priority here. So that's just a scenario that hasn't happened and will not happen because of how we've engineered it. We have back drivable systems so that nothing will jam and tear itself apart. I hope that makes sense. That I can go into the actual mechanics, but that's probably not what you're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Zoe Kwan asked a question about cost benefit trade-offs. I know you and I discussed that at some length. Mm-hmm. Expand on that. I told you during the Q&A you'd get to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the current transfer cost, if I may, is the cost of the capital equipment that's in use, and then the cost of the labor. The key premise and the key thing to realize is that the cost of the labor is extremely high. And for the argument's sake, I'm not even going to include cost of injuries that's caused by this. In a typical CT room, there is approximately 12 to 15 transfers conducted via lateral supine transfer methods every single day. You can aggregate the lost time of the machine, because when somebody comes in on a stretcher, the technician does not necessarily have all the resources available. They need to go out and call additional individuals to conduct the transfer. That's downtime for the machine, that's lost revenue. When you aggregate that over a full year and the additional revenue, the numbers are in and around the $400,000 to $800,000 every single year in revenue that our device could bring, because it would be available all the time. So there is a very significant opportunity for increased revenue. And then there's additional factors such as potential to reduce the amount of labor utilization per ward. And then there's the injury aspects as well. I hope that kind of addressed the cost utilization you're talking about, Steve, or was it more around the unit economic side?
Well, both. And for the audience, I push Jay, as I always do. When people talk to me about labor savings, I say, yeah, I understand the calculation. It doesn't count to me until you save enough that you can eliminate an FTE. Because the example we discussed, if you have to pull two people in that are doing something else, you're saying that's labor cost, but they're not going to work any less. They're not going to hire somebody else to do what they were doing. So some of it's contrived, and I understand you got a model, until you actually realize it. So go into a little bit of the human economics as well.
Yeah, and one more thing I'd add is one thing that COVID has exposed is that facilities need to maintain their operations. Like they have a minimum benchmark for the amount of labor they need to have, but their elective procedures are going down. In order to stay sustainable, they need people to do more with less. So instead of thinking of labor savings as savings, it's allowing them to do more with less, cater to more patients is what our technology will do. And estimates indicate, labor saved in terms of worker hours is approximately $70,000. But what that really means is hospitals have the opportunity to redeploy that staff to conduct other tasks that they're already stretched thin on. On the unit economic side, we are engaging in value-based, which is we're focused on how much additional revenue we can generate per clinical area. That's kind of the biggest driver of value for us, as you hinted at, Steve. The numbers right now are in and around the $50,000 to $90,000 per unit as an upfront purchase, but we're looking at creative lease-based or even consumable-based, because we talked about cleaning, connection into EMRs, for example. We can supply them with patient weight and some more data there. On the cost side, it's very attractive, and that's where our background is. I've spent 5 years on factory floors setting up large-scale manufacturing, and we're looking at between $10,000 to $15,000 of cost of goods sold at volume.
So on your needs side, you say development of reimbursement strategies. So how are you thinking about reimbursement?
We recognize that there's a lot of potential for our technology to influence the health and safety committees, because injuries and liabilities are a big part, and those are longer term kind of returns that we will afford to facilities. But we believe that would make us a very attractive play for reimbursement strategies in the US. Over here in Canada, the strategies are completely different. So we're really looking for any guidance on helping us develop that, because we see it as a key opportunity for our technology to get reimbursement from agencies.
Well, I think that'll be a good topic for the mentors during your working sessions, because the reimbursement is usually per patient for some specific. So I'm not sure I see it, but we're not going to solve that today.
Sure.
I got a question here from Steve that's in some way related to that. My impression of the economics is that the costs are more in terms of workman's comp and bringing temp staff in to replace injured nurses, but there is no hospital department responsible. So what hospital department would cover acquisition cost? What priority would this get versus other capital equipment needs?
Mm-hmm. I can speak to like the first pilot we're having right now, and you're spot on their biggest issue is incremental costs, which was $1 million in 2010, and it climbed to $3 million. And this is a 200-bed facility focused on geriatric care. It's such a high priority item because this is a budget item that's tripled over a long period of time, that all their VPs are on this, and they recognize that this is a big hospital cost. It's not just one department. So it's being driven by that level. But I can speak to another story where if that is not the case in imaging, it's not being driven by replacing injured nurses, it's being driven by additional revenue. So in that case, the cost should be covered by the medical imaging department. Whereas over here, this will really be pushed and championed by the quality improvement teams and the health and safety committees in terms of bringing this into the entire establishment. So I hope that kind of answers the answer. Then what hospital department would cover the acquisition cost? I think it really depends on the clinical area. So I spoke about one scenario for imaging. The other area that we're looking at is complex continuing care. We believe those wards are significant enough in being able to afford our technology. But as you get into more variable settings where the utilization is more ad hoc, such as OR, ER, et cetera, that's where we'll need some guidance on how we can get them to justify the cost.
Okay, thanks. Last question, we're right on time. This is from Henry Alder. Any injury prevention evidence, but I want to add on to this. Injury prevention evidence and workflow increased volume evidence. I mean, those are the claims you're making. Mm-hmm. What evidence do you have for both of them?
Absolutely. So we are pre-pilot right now. We're piloting in the next 3 to 6 months. So I'll be clear about that we don't have direct evidence of products being used. In June, we'll have our products reaching into the facilities where there's going to be a 3-month, they're being funded $100,000 by the Canadian government to answer exactly those questions. But there is a very logical understanding that now that you don't have frontline staff repositioning individuals, pulling them from the baseboard to the headboard, or exerting backbreaking effort from side to side, there is going to be saving. Another thing worth noting is these facilities have actually used other electromechanical devices. I know there's a question ahead about those. And they have a keen understanding of why they failed. And it's another vote of confidence that facilities that have already sunk costs into a failed experiment that was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars want to re-engage with us because they see something really special. And we've really honed in on what that difference is. And they have they have a taste of how those experiments saved them injuries, but the technology just could not be adopted and integrated into their workflows because of how it was developed. So it's not direct, it's an indirect way of showing that.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Good job. Thanks to the mentors again. As I said, we're right on time. So I really want to thank everyone. The presenters did a terrific job. Thanks to the mentors for filling out and asking questions. Thanks to the Matter crew and the folks at the consulate. I hope this worked for everybody. The only thing I think you missed is your beer, and we'll get that next year. So Sam, Casey, any wrap up?
Yeah, just want to echo you, Steve. Great job to all 4 presenters. Amazing presentations. It's great to see how far you've come in just a few weeks. So super excited to see how far you'll come over the next 6 months. All the mentors, thank you again. Like we've mentioned a couple of times now, first time we've done this virtually, we weren't really sure how it was going to go. Very happy to see all the engagement with the mentors in the Q&A section. We actually had more questions than we were able to answer. So if your question was not answered during the Q&A session, I took note of it. We will follow up with the startups and I will make sure that that question gets answered.
Thanks, Sam.